second day of the second week for our summer school, and I'm very glad to introduce you our today lecturer, our beginner of the day, and Maxim Fakeyev. It's very good tradition for our summer school to include the lecture from Maxim. Now we are waiting for their interest in speaking about the air transportation industry, maybe passenger air transportation or all air transportation, I don't know. I guess Maxim will speak about, and you have a chance to additional know more about your tutor, I mean the two teams of Maxim, and that's all from my side, and flow goes to Maxim Alexandrovich Fakeyev, our alumni, now is a participant of the staff of High School of Economics. Yes, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Professor Ludmila Rostislavovna, thank you for this warmly introducing me. I'm very appreciated of that. Now I will share my screen. Okay, can you see it? Guys, anyone in Zoom? Can you see?
Yep, we can see.
Yes, so great. Okay. Maybe, unfortunately, but my topic will not be about the creative economy and how to create innovation clusters in region perspective, but nevertheless, I think that some interesting notes and some interesting lessons will be appropriate to your case study, to your case home task for Domna clusters, but also we will talk about maybe one of the most effective by 3 years of COVID and now sanctions after February 2022, the most effective industry and how to survive in the life of uncertainty and how to survive in the life of huge number of external barriers, external bans and sanctions. First of all, I want to communicate with you. I want to talk with you, but I try to create some maybe service, word cloud in Espresso or something else, interesting website services. But during the sanctions, we can't pay for these services. So let's use the chat. I have 2 questions to you from now. We will discuss it a little bit later. First of all, it's a question about how often do you fly average per year, for example, 2 or 3 times per year, or maybe more flights or something else. And the second question is about what is the purpose of the flight. You often fly for a tourist purpose, or you fly to a family, to home, or you also fly for education, for some conferences and some internship program. You can write your question you can write your answers in a chat. We will discuss it a little bit later. I will say again, the first question, how often do you fly in average per year? And the second question is about the purpose of your flight, the most often purpose of your flights. We will discuss it. Okay, now, okay, it's working. We will talk about 3 different topics. First of all is how the COVID impact aviation industry. And as already said, the aviation industry was the most affected by the COVID restriction. And after that, when the market started to grow, started to return to pre-COVID position indicators. We had the sanctions after February 2022, and how we can live during these sanctions in the short and medium term perspective. And I think is the most important question for us as passengers. What about safety during the post-sanctions market recovery, and how we can minimize the negative impact of sanctions to Russian aviation industry? Okay, let's start from COVID-19. Guys, do not forget to write in a chat. It will be very interesting to see your answers. How everything happens in 2020. It's not so long, but everything changed significantly. First of all, the COVID-19 spread very fast, and you see that in the end of January in 2020, we have only 100 of infections outside of China, and then less than 2 weeks, World Health Organization says that COVID is an urgent crisis. It will lead to the not crisis in personal communication. It will lead to crisis in a different industry, and aviation is the main factor of fast COVID-19 number of cases increasing, because it happened in China, and China is a major aviation center in Asia, and due to high people mobility and etc., aviation was the most important factor of growing COVID numbers. And you can see that in the month we have 100,000 diseases involved, and COVID started to be a pandemic. And as you can see, when World Health Organization in March said that COVID is pandemic, in September of 2020, when we have only 5% of all COVID cases from 2020 to 2022, the air transportation in the world dropped by 70%. And as you can see, the recovery path will be not so fast. For example, if we compare the decrease in passenger number by other crises, for example, a terroristic attack, 9/11, Iraq-Iran war, oil crisis, and something else, recession in 2008, we hear the recovery path was very fast. It was like a V-shaped path, but now we can see that until the January of 2022, the passenger flow number of flights do not recover to pre-COVID positions. And now we are talking about the world perspective. And here you can see, now we are diving into the details. And from the world perspective, let's take a look at regional perspective, where we can see that the bigger drop happened at international traffic. Why? Because, as I already said, China was a very huge aviation hub, and people from China can travel all over the world. Some of them have a transfer stop in China, not flying to China, but have a transfer to another destinations. And international flights historically was the more profitable, is the more popular, and we can see that it's dropped significantly due to government and international restrictions and boundaries closure in countries. And the most affected by crisis was the more developed aviation regions, for example, Europe, where we can see that passenger traffic dropped by 75% for international traffic, but internal traffic, domestic flights decrease more lightly. Why? Because, for example, in Europe, we don't have an ability to increase our domestic network, flight network. Why? Because of a small distance between countries, because you can take a car, you can take a train and travel between big cities, and it's not take a lot of time for you comparing to aircraft when you need to arrive to airport, pass registration, pass some securities procedures and something else, and it will be a comparable time if you take a car, take a train. It's more comfortable maybe, and go to another destination. But nevertheless, a more sustainable during this crisis was the developing markets. For example, Latin America, for example, Africa and Middle East, for example, maybe Asia and Oceania in domestic flights. You can see here different types of aircrafts on airlines. Sorry. For example, a full service carriers, it's like Etihad, Lufthansa, Aeroflot, when you have different types of services on board. And this aircraft, especially for higher than the middle average passenger, they fly between the big cities. You can also see a low-cost carrier. The most important of the most popular in this category is Ryanair. For Russia, it's a Pobeda airline, where airline attract passenger by a low price to their ticket, and give you a lot of services by additional payment. But nevertheless, one of the important conclusions from this graphic is from this picture is that the most suitable sustainable was a developing market. Why? Because they have huge geography. For example, Asia, China, when they started to cancel their coronavirus barriers to passenger movement, to the passenger mobility, airlines can reorganize their flight network from international to internal market. Indeed, it became one of the driver for development internal geography and recovery path for airlines. And what about Russia? We can see that starting from 2050, aviation market increased the operational indicators in domestic and international flights. And you can see international flights is already set the world perspective growth higher rates than domestic flights, because it's more profitable. Because, for example, when started a summer, it's calling something like a high season. People often fly to Turkey, to Egypt, to Europe to have a vacation. It's more profitable type of flight network, because also airlines generate revenue not in rubles but in euro, dollars, and something else. So it was good for them. And also we can see that airlines increase their flight efficiency by seat occupancy dynamics. It's a number of available seats per airlines, and we see that starting from 2015, these indicators increase. But what happened during the crisis? It's 2020, the coronavirus crisis happened, and we see that in Russia it's dropped. The passenger traffic dropped down at 55%. Keep in mind international indicators, bold indicators, where we can see that passenger traffic dropped by 75% for Europe, 70% for Asia, etc., etc. In Russia, 55% traffic, 55% drop in passenger traffic. It's good. It's okay. It's better than in the world. Seat occupancy dropped by 10%. It's okay, it's good. But in 2021, passenger traffic increased by 160%. Of course, it happened due to the low base, because when we drop down, increase in passenger flights will give you a good growth indicators like this. But nevertheless, it's good news for us, because Russian markets became one of the fastest recovery market after COVID. Why it happened? Again, as already said, it happened because our flight geography, our ability to diversify our flight geography from international flights to domestic flights. And maybe the first conclusion which I want to say, and which maybe will be more suitable to your cases, maybe the Domna cluster, is that we need diversification from something international perspective to Russian-oriented market, or maybe a regional-oriented market is a more interesting things, because we can see that it's not developed in Russia. So in some huge indicators, like for example international markets, indeed it's the way how we can survive during the hard crisis, maybe right now during the sanctions, when the passenger can't fly so much time to popular international destinations, and they start to fly in Russia, they start to discover Russian regions, and maybe to understand what they're looking for. It's a good thing how we can survive during the crisis. And how the airlines react to this crisis, I think it will be also important and interesting for you. We conducted a survey in March 2020 with the major Russian airlines. Maybe some of them you know. Also, if you are not in Russia, I suggest, for example, Aeroflot, you know, because it's one of the biggest airlines in the world. Also, we are in Yekaterinburg, we ask Ural Airlines, it's our base airline here. And some other carriers like Siberia, Azimut, it's a regional carrier in the south of Russia. It's located in Rostov-on-Don. Severstal, it's a carrier with the Severstal company, and the Nordwind Airlines, Red Wings, Sweetair, and something else. And we try to understand how they plan to survive during the short perspective, during the short perspective, 1 year after COVID. In the middle term perspective, it's 2 or 3 years after COVID. Before that, we try to understand how much services airlines had before the crisis. And we try to buy a ticket by each airlines and count the number of services by each color. And we see that before the crisis, airlines have a different set of services. Like for example, an Aeroflot. When you buy a ticket and when you plan your travel, you can get 40 additional services. What is the services? It's Air Express, it's a taxi, it's a hotel in a city where you will depart, or something else. During the flight, they give you more than 20 services, the sky shop items and the different types of menus of food and drinks and something else. It's a baggage handling and something other. And after flight, it's more than 4 or 5 services. And as you can see, airlines try to attract a passenger, but different set of services. And it's one of the our conclusion from these interviews. They said that, okay, if we increase the number of services, it can attract different types of passenger to us. And maybe you can think that, okay, if we, for example, to Domna give a more additional services, more additional purpose and opportunities in this cluster, it will attract a more different types of customers to us. And it was a major, a little bit later we'll see from the passenger perspective, but from the company's perspective, we see the major logic increasing the number of services can attract a more different types of customers and can increase their loyalty. And airlines think that during the COVID, we will reduce the cost, we will cut some services, which is not popular. But after the 2 or 3 years, we think the COVID will go out. I just remind, we take this interview in 2020 when nobody knows about sanctions and something else. And we will again increase the number of services and these services will help us to increase our growth rate from the low base after the crisis. And what is the conclusions from passenger sides? We asked airlines, we asked passengers. Again, also in April and to June of 2020, we asked more than 700 passengers from European part of Russia. Why only European part of Russia? Because it's a it is the most developed aviation development hub and part of Russia. You know, the Russian Russian students know that sometimes it's easier to fly from Yekaterinburg to Moscow and then get to Kazan, comparing to the direct flight and direct transfer to Yekaterinburg to Kazan. It can be cheaper, it can be faster, and it can be more suitable and comfortable to you as a passenger. And this flight centralization around the Moscow, around the biggest cities, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, Rostov-on-Don, Sochi, create here the huge hub for Russian. And we, you can see a graph of our respondent geographical distribution. We also asked them about their experience of flying different airlines. You can see here the distribution plot of how the passenger experience by flights that airlines distinguished. And we used a non-traditional way how to measure the passenger reaction to COVID-19 and how to measure their changes in personal and consumer behavior. Yesterday, I took a part. I connected for a few minutes to a lecture of Professor Stanislavna for you when she told about different types of measures, different types of instruments to conclude your study, to conclude your research with the consumers. She said that we have now restrictions to some international databases like Ruslan, Zephyr, something else, but the primary data is available to you every day and all over the time. We also use a primary data in non-traditional way. We don't ask passenger about how do you feeling about different types of services, what is important to you. It's more important to have different types of food and drinks, or it's more important to have a huge a huge opportunity to pay. You can pay, for example, not only by rubles, you can pay by your frequent flyer money in your frequent flyer program and something else. We don't ask about that. Why? Because when we ask to compare the different types of services, people start to think about the importance of that. And of course, he will give you an answer, what is more important. But it's not the similar decision when he will be in airline and will be choose between different types of services, because here you ask him directly, and in airplane he will think from the utility, from the personal expectation from the services. It will be a different types of decision. If you are interested, you can check you can read about it in any literature about architecture of choice or decision-making theory, and after say that it's not a good way how to measure the importance of different services. What we used? We ask passenger only one. We ask every passenger only one question. It was like this question looks like. Your flying with Aeroflot experience, your experience of flying Aeroflot and Ural Airlines were different, or it was similar. We asked to compare airlines, and ask about the experience. It's a different or similar, and we don't ask any question about importance of different services. And after that, using some mathematical tools, I don't pay a lot of attention to describe our math conclusions, but it's this method called like a multidimensional scaling, and we compare 3 ways and 2 ways graph, where we can see the mental pattern of how people distinguish different airlines, how they differ in their mind. We don't ask again about the importance of different services. We ask about how the one airline differ from each other. And and we need only to understand this dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, and to find the quantitative dimensions which will represent the difference between each point, between each dot of airlines. And to do that, as already said, we try to count the number of services in the different stages: before flight, in flight, after flight. And we need to fly quantitative measures for these dimensions. And what we can see, that in the 3-dimensional, there is no one dimension which is related to the number of services. The first dimension is easy to buy a ticket when people can, when the low number of clicks, it's like a predictors of the low number of services. The dimension 2 is the aircraft load factor, is the passenger occupancy, which is something like a proxy variable of speed of services and speed of boarding, unboarding, etc. And dimension 3 is the number of how we can spin off Frequent program loyalty measures or money, this virtual money. And it's lead us to the conclusion that the passenger in Russia, for example, also we here ask about how Aeroflot differ, and Aeroflot is a premium car. Our passenger continue to be a price sensitive, and the different number of services which airlines tend to do, it doesn't lead to a passenger differentiation in their mind of different carriers. And these different types of services finally didn't lead to different carriers, and didn't lead to a choice of specific carrier. It leads that passenger continue to be a price sensitive, and it leads that increasing the number of services will lead to decrease in passenger loyalty. It will lead to decrease in passenger reaction after the flight, and which it will not lead to a passenger loyalty, as already said. And it's calling in literature about architecture of choice, like information overload. And the second conclusion here is that when you increase the number of services, you create for your customer a more complicated task of choosing the best suitable event, activities, product, and something else. And it will lead that he will stop looking for the additional services, buy a ticket, and go out from your cluster and from your company and something else. So the best way is to find the gold middle ship, where the increasing number of services increase their loyalty, and after that increase in number of services will decrease their loyalty, and maybe to create some custom decision or something like a customization of a choice. And again, to our aviation industry, we see that during the crisis, in case of decrease the number of passengers for airlines, the airlines and passenger move to different ways. Airlines tend to increase the number of services. Passenger is not the passengers don't feel this, these services, and don't differentiate the carriers by these services. And how they react, and how finally, after 2020, in 2021, starting 2022, passenger airlines react to this crisis. We used here another type of research methods. It's calling, we used media. We used a news about airlines, not from official channels, but also from a Telegram channel, something else, to understood what's changed in the airlines business model during the crisis. And why using the news mentions of airlines is a relevant research strategy now. Because, of course, as Professor Stanislav yesterday said, we have a lack of data, but using the media mentions can give you ability to find every actions of your companies. Because, for example, if in official channels, airlines will not tell about some negative cases when they'll decrease the number of services and something else, but using, for example, a Telegram channel and parsing the news from Telegram channel, delete all emotional scales and analyze only the facts, you can find that, for example, somebody wrote that airlines decrease these services, it's bad for me and something else, and you can build and construct something like a good picture of changes business model in the industry or companies' actions. And we try to build this picture for airlines from 2020 to 2021 and divide all media mentions of airlines into 3 categories: change in a strategy, changes in a product, change in assets, a number of assets. And comparing, for example, to European, to other international markets, we see that the Russian reactions was different, slightly different. First of them, it's happened due to change in the strategy. We see that airlines was not really active in that. In a strategy, we conducted some actions with creating new aviation hub, for example. It's a situation where airlines take planes to some regional airports and start to fly direct regional flights from, for example, Ekaterinburg or something else. It changes in value proposition, for example, when we start to fly not only with the passengers but also with freight and something else, and airlines will not so active. Why? Because, again, as already said, due to our huge regional distribution, where we can diversify our products to internal market, to increase internal ability to flight, and that we can see the most often the color intensity means the number of mentions. When color is more intensive, it's more mentions. And we can see that in a product path, airlines was more active, and it's also a diversification of our flight geography to a regional flight. And in the assets, we see that airlines increase the number of services, increase the number of airplanes, and looking at this picture, we can make a third conclusion that COVID-19 was maybe not a huge crisis for Russian airlines, but it was the time of new opportunities. It's a time to new opportunities on regional markets where we can, for example, for Aeroflot, our premium full service carriers with different types of services, Aeroflot tried to compare different types of passenger in one place: a premium passenger, decreasing a price, attracting a price sensitive passenger, and something else. And it was a way, a time for developing new markets, for developing new products for airlines. And here is some interesting practices of airlines, how they can lived in this time of uncertainty. Before that, I want to take a little bit view to a chat. Maybe you have some answers in the chat about your flying frequency. Just a second, I try to. Sorry, I can't open the chat. Okay. Here's some interesting activities how airlines lived in the COVID-19. For example, most of the practices were created, and maybe the fourth conclusion in this lecture, were not created separately. For example, we create one product, we create some new services, and that's all. Airlines try to customize and build something like a customer journey map. They try to find a synergy between different services. And for your cases, maybe it can be an interesting practice to create not only one service or one idea. The best solution from my point of view actually will be to create something like a journey for customer and find the synergies between different types of clusters, between different types of activities in the donor clusters or something else. Something the same create in airlines. I want to pay attention to 7 practices. When they implemented the practice of building a relationship with the customers. For example, it's a program flying at home. What they done? They give us 100 miles every day if you have if you checked in at your home, at your stable locations, and after the COVID crisis, you can exchange this internal money to a price discount, to your price. And what happened? In a crisis, S7 attract a new passenger because you need only to make a one click every day and nothing more. And after that, you can get more than 3,000 rubles discount for the ticket. It helps them to attract a passenger during the crisis. And it's helped to retain these customers after the crisis when the operation is started. Something else was happened by Aeroflot Pobeda. It's also very interesting practices. I know the same practices of Qantas airline in Australia. When the airlines take the full plane of passenger, they fly around the most interesting places in their country, in the regional for Australia. Aeroflot flight to Krasnodar and as a premium cover have a wine degustation, different types of wines on their plane. Pobeda flight around the gold ring, Zolotoye Koltso, around the Moscow. And during this flight, passengers have an entertainment program in a plane. And I want to say that the ticket for these flights was not the comparable price but each other tickets by regular flight. For example, if you can buy a ticket to a regular flight for Pobeda around maybe the 3,000 rubles to and from destination. For example, for this ticket, for this flight, the ticket was started from 10,000 rubles. And they make the several flights around the Golden Ring, and it was a very popular practice which helped to not to forget about airlines, to attract a new passenger, to create some new media mentions discussion about the company, and help them to retain a passenger after the crisis. As already said, the fourth conclusion is to create not a lone idea, to find a synergy between different ideas, to create a customer journey map where you can find a way how to attract and retain a passenger. And here, briefly, you can see the conclusions about different types of reaction. As already said, the Russian market was a more The COVID-19 for Russian market was not about the passenger growth, but of course it happened, but more about how to survive during the crisis, how we can find the domestic growth point in our domestic markets. And here you can see it's a number of mentions of airlines actions. We can see that during the crisis for 2 years, the fleet expansion, increasing the number of a fleet. For medium fleet, it's Boeing 737, Airbus 320, which used on the most Russian regional routes, was the more popular mention. Then you can see the fleet expansion, creating new hub, extension of services, especially in flight, to attract a new passenger, and maybe a transportation of goods, resumption of flights. It also were something like a different reaction comparing, for example, to international market, when they try to, when the foreign carriers try to ask for additional money, additional financial stability during the crisis. Russian airlines try not to find financial stability because they know that following our government restriction, government business processes, we can get money. If we ask for money in 2020, we can get only in 2021, but we need more money right now to make a flights, to pay a salary to our workers, employees, and something else. So they try to save their operational activities. They try to save their flights by repatriation flight from international countries to Russia in the start of a crisis, transportation of goods, and it's highlighted the higher speed of this diversity, high speed of reconfiguration our business models. And it was something like a good story, maybe somewhere a story of success for some carriers, for most of Russian airlines. But in 2022, in February, in a good way of post-crisis recovery, international sanctions highlighted the most important risks for Russian airlines in three different categories. It's the three more important risks for Russian airlines. The first one is the route network, the flight geography. After the crisis, during which airlines reconfigure their network to domestic flight, some of them think that we are going to a higher season, the summer is coming, and people will fly to foreign airlines, and some of carriers try to go back and increase the number of international flights, because they are more profitable, they are more attractive. It's every airlines, every carrier know how to operate on this market, and it was something like a best scenario for them. But we have sanctions with banning all international flights of using airspace, and coming to a summer season, airlines need again, some airlines which more interested in international routes tend to again reconfigure their strategy to domestic flights. Air fleet, the next important risk for Russian air transport market. In case of huge number of foreign airlines, we will talk about that a little bit later. But nevertheless, we have a ban to repair parts, equipment for airlines. We have a ban for flight certificates. It means that we need to return our planes to our leasing companies in foreign countries, in foreign countries, we have a cancellation of insurance from leasing companies to our fleet, and the most discussed sanctions was about the returning of all Russian fleet less than 1 month. It's more than 700 planes. Leasing company asked for to return more than 700 planes less than 1 month. It was a more discussed sanction package and something else. And the second and the third one is also important risk. It's a risk in aviation production construction industry. Where also, like in the air fleet risk, we have a cancellation of technical service, we have abandoned repair parts equipment, we have a cancellation of aircraft contracts of selling Russian planes to foreign markets, and prohibiting access to IT solution, IT services, charts, weather support, route support, technical support. For example, when planes make the operational flights, technical team finds some and also publish some instructions, some guides how to work in different situations, how to make a repair, how to make additional services for planes and something, etc., etc. And it was banned for Russia. We don't know how to operate, how to repair our planes after the banning all support from providers, from sellers, from Airbus and Boeing and something else. To which indicators it's led? We can see that less than 2 months, less than not months, weeks, Russian airlines lost more than 78 planes. Some of them was on the repair base on international airports. They have standard technical procedure. Then we went there. After the 24th of February, some airlines don't know what to do. They continue flying to international routes, for example, to Egypt, to Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Georgia, and the planes was banned and arrested after the landing in foreign airports. And we lost, as already said, 78 planes in 2 weeks. The most dangerous for us, it's a request to return Russian planes to foreign leasing companies. Here on the right side of the slide is a graph of distribution Russian airlines by planes by Russian carriers, and the property about the ownership by airline or ownership by leasing companies. And here you can see that implementing these sanctions about returning the Russian planes. For example, we are in Yekaterinburg. Our main carrier in Yekaterinburg, Ural Airlines, will lost all of their planes. 57 planes will go to leasing companies, and Ural Airlines will not have planes. The similar situation will happen to Smart Avia airline. Maybe this, yes, of course, the similar situation will happen with North Star, iFly Airlines, North Star, and Smart Avia. It's a regional carrier. iFly, it's a tourist charter carrier which fly from Moscow to China and working for China's tourist companies. The most stable situation will be for Aeroflot, Russia, and Azimut. Why? Aeroflot, it's more than 180 planes. Of course, we will lost the bigger part of our fleet, 107 planes, but 79 planes will live in Aeroflot. The same situation will happen in Russia, and the most successful situation will be for Azimut Airlines. It's a fourth line from the down. 15 planes will save in airlines. Why? Because this fleet also from Sukhoi Superjet, the Russian manufacturer, Russian planes, and these sanctions don't somehow react on airlines. Now, it's maybe the 3 airlines which saved on Russian market. Also, you can see that 77% of finally 77% of planes were in ownership of foreign leasing companies, and after the implementation of all sanctions package, Russian air transport market will save only 23% of planes. 30% is the Sukhoi Superjet and 10% is the other Soviet airlines. From 100% of airlines, more than 1,000 airlines, we will save only, for example, 200 planes. What's happened with the price? What's happened with the flight geography? What's happened to flights from and in Far East? Maybe in some regions where the planes is a long type of geographical mobility, of passenger mobility. There is no railway, there is no good roads, or travel by road will take not comparable time to a planes. What happened with that? We don't know, but we know that that this situation with these international sanctions is not the first in the world aviation history. The same situation happened with Iran. Why? Because more than 40 years, Iran was under the non-comparable, the huge international sanctions. Why Iran is so interesting? Here you can see a short history of Iran aviation. How to close the chat? Okay. How to Iran was in the same situation. For example, there is a three stages of airlines aviation industry development. I will not talk a lot about that, but you can see that it was something like a similar. Somebody calls that history of Iran aviation, it's calling American Airlines in Iran. Why? Because it's more easier to attract a big partner, a big country with knowledge and experience in creating infrastructure, to create the same infrastructure in your country. This way goes Iran from 2033 until 2064. American Airlines, American government create all infrastructure. They create airlines. It's called Junkers, then Iranian State Airlines. They create airports. They create some technical equipment, etc., etc. And create also a flight geography, which were something like a transfer hub from Europe, from America to Middle East, to Asia, and something else when planes arrive to Tehran, and then from Tehran fly to Asia and Middle East. But in 2064, Iran, when United States create the whole infrastructure in Iran, try to nationalize this infrastructure, creating their own airline, Iran Airlines, and creating a government support for international flights as comparable to Russia. As I already said, international flights became one of the most popular in one of the most attractive type of flight geography or flight activity of airlines. And they, of course, create international flights, which is more popular for country, for passenger. And what happened? In 1979, happened Iran Islamic Revolution, and Iran became a sponsor of international terrorism by the United States opinion. And after that happened American embassy hostage, bombing, terrorist attack of marine barracks in Beirut of United States. After that, Iran tried to increase their safety, tried to create nuclear bomb, and got a sanction after 1979 in case of terroristic attack, in case of revolution. It's not democracy revolution, because Iran became an Islamic country, and starting the nuclear program, Iran got comprehensive sanctions until 2015. And from the 1979 until 2015, Iran don't stop the development of the aviation. Of course, American airlines, American specialists, go out, leave the Iran, left Iran, but infrastructure saved. The plane saved in Iran, and they need to live under the sanctions, which is sometimes similar to Russian sanctions, but the difference in the time of sanction implementation, the package of sanction implementation. As you know, for Russia, we got the, just not to make a mistake, maybe the 6th package of sanctions, and now the European Union thinks about the 7th package of sanctions. But 6th package of sanctions will happen less than 2 or 3 months for Russia. For Iran, the several sanctions was implemented more than 40 years. And it, of course, leads to more time to adapt these sanctions until the 2015. When Iran, with the United Nations, with the Germany, United Nations countries, signs a joint comprehensive plan of actions. It's called a nuclear deal, ядерная сделка on Russian. When Iran stopped their nuclear program, and international community, USA, European Union, cancel all sanctions for Iran. It's opened the window to decrease the American impact on aviation and update air fleet, update air transport market, and something else. And you can see in the table in the down of a slide that started from 2015, Iran tried to do that. They tried to decrease the importance of US in aviation industry in case of increasing the number of Airbus planes. It's European planes to update their fleet, and they asked for 100 planes of Boeing, 173 planes of Airbus, but in 2018, when Donald Trump became a president, United States quit the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, nuclear deal, and said that Iran again is a sponsor of terrorism. Trump said that Iran is a sponsor of terrorism, and again implement all the sanctions from 40 years history. And in this 3 years, it's windows of new experience, opportunities. Iran, as I already said, ordered 120 planes, but until 2018 delivered 0 planes. In Airbus, they delivered on the 3 planes, and nothing happened significant. Iran, it's 3 years, it's a small time, it's not enough to reconfigure the whole industry. And following that, the situation is Iran is something similar to Russian. With Iran, like Iran, we have a banned plans to sanction, to after sanctions, to European Union, to USA. We have a ban to use European and United States airspace. We have no ability to get some repair equipment, some new planes, and something else. But looking at the slide, you can think that sanctions in Russia is the number of sanctions in Russia is high, but looking not on the number of sanctions, but the mechanism, the soul, the idea, the types of sanctions is similar to Iran. And following that, we have an assumption that we can use Iran experience to overcome the sanctions impact for Russian air transport market. How Iran overcomes the sanctions? I think we investigate the different types of services of Iran, the different types of how to overcome sanctions. It's not the whole list, because Iran continued to be under the pressure, under the sanction. Joe Biden came to Far East. Came to Far East and asked Iran to and other Saudi Arabia and some other countries to agree with European Union and to implement the sanctions under the Russian. It's not happened still successfully. But this, as I already said, this list is not a final list. Sanctions continue to be implemented, and this practice is a real practice of Iran, how to overcome the sanctions. Most of them are related to complex trading schemes. When Iran used the front companies in different regions, when Iran used companies in different trading zones, with using the uncertainty with the sanctions, when one sanction is implemented, one is cancelled, and things happened over the years several times. Iran used the contracts with open date when, for example, using the little bit decreasing the sanction pressure, it's helped Iran fastly to get equipment, planes, and something else. And as I already said, complicated trading patterns. This scheme not often implement not separately. Some of them are combining, and here you can see how it's combined by Iran in real life. For example, here is the complex trading scheme, how Iran government, how Iran Air got several Boeing 747 from United States, which is the main actor of sanctions, to their fleet, how they update their fleet. Here is the 4 planes which they got. From Virgin Atlantics, it's American Airlines. These planes, after the usage on United States, was sold to Blue Aviation or some leasing companies in another jurisdiction, and then send again to another companies or transfer to Pakistan, and after that transferring to another agent, and after that came to Mahan Air or Iran Air. I want to pay attention for the dates, the difference of dates between this this scheme realizing. Starting from 2013, planes came to Iran in 2015. When the planes come to Pakistan Airlines, Al Nasser Airlines, this plane operates in Pakistan Airlines, and one day the planes arrived to Iran and left in Iran. And these sanctions, this way was protected by government. And 2007, airlines government create a program is calling like economy or economics of resistance, экономика сопротивления on Russian, which helps to where government supports these schemes. It's one of the most popular scheme, and after the scheme was realized, the companies the proxy companies became bankruptcy. For example, Hi-Fly-Might, Avialo, and something else. And when United States tried, Department of Finance, or Commerce, or Trading, and something else, tried to understand and find the final beneficiary of selling the planes, or try to develop this scheme to understand how it got to Iran and get sanctions to proxy companies or proxy companies, then couldn't do that, because after the sanction, after the scheme was implemented, the company was bankruptcy and they don't find how it works, how the planes arrive to Iran and start flying to Iran. And what is similar with Iran and Russia? Briefly. Of course, we have a similar infrastructure, but in Russia, we have more abilities to increase the number of services, increase the number of flight geography, because we have a number of airplanes. It's our competitive advantage comparing to Iran. Following the number of airlines, of course, we have a higher number of airlines, but several years it leads to the huge it leads to a huge number of supply on the market, but the concentration level on the market is similar to Iran. We see that the top 5 companies can control more than around the 70% of a market. In European and international flight geography distribution, we see that the most flights were in Europe, but for Iran it's more flights to the east, and following that, we see that the Russian market is more addictive for sanctions because of more than 56% of flights in Europe, which creates sanctions to Russia. It creates a more dangerous situation. But in flight geography, again, we are similar. More than 60% flights centralized in capital region, in Tehran or Moscow, and the difference here is only in the government support. For example, for Iran, it supports, as I already said, following the United States experience, is support for international flights, which is more profitable, but for Russia, it's a support of regional flights and direct regional flights in Russia, because we have a huge territory and we have some social important route network. About air fleet management, we see that Russian market is higher, is more than 1,200 planes, but the average year is better. It's good news for us. It also happened due to COVID-19, when in the time of decrease in the passenger flow, airlines try to make a repair. I had types of repair airlines, or update the air fleet, get a new fleet. As you remind several slides ago, I showed the graph when you can see the assets is a more popular way of airlines action during the crisis. But the most important risks for Russian airlines is that the ownership of Russian planes is the foreign ownership. You can say Malta, Ireland, and something else. And a small number of planes are registered in Russia. It's created a risk that, as we already said, about order to return the planes to foreign leasing companies. And what about aviation industry? For Russia, it's creates something like it's something like a good news, because in a long-term perspective, it can solve the problem of all the international foreign planes. But in Russia we don't. In Iran, sorry, we don't have aircraft manufacturer. But for Russia, it's also created several risks. As I already said, we can have an ability to get some tools, some services from foreign partners, following the contracts also. But we have some work onto the fully Russian planes. It's a MC-21 and Sukhoi Superjet new, which was fully constructed in Russia, because until this situation, the Sukhoi Superjets 2, it's called Russian planes, but in fact it's something like a Lego. When there are huge international cooperations between different partners, and in Russia it's only constructed creating a Lego of planes. And some facts about Russia. What is the difference between Russia? A few slides ago we talk about what is similar between Iran and Russia, and here is the difference between our countries. We see that our mobility in Russia is less than in the world. For example, in European parts, the most developed parts, the flight mobility for person is a 2.5, 3 flights per year. It's an average number of flights per year. For example, if we go out of Central Russia, behind the Urals, to Siberia, Far East, the flight mobility is 0.3. It's less than 1 flight per year. It's 1 flight per 2 years and something else. And how is this, in this condition, we can develop our regional network? When the people don't fly, in case of in case of higher prices, in case of low quality of infrastructure and something else. I compared with Norway, with Norway. With a similar climate, with a similar geographic situation, the flight mobility for passenger is near the 4 flights per year. Again, for Russia, it's 0.3. Centralization of the flight geography, different types of airport with a low flight developed regions in Russia leads that with the similar types, with the similar requirements with aviation safety, similar requirements with airport infrastructure, it leads to low efficiency of air transport complex out of European part of Russia. And it's a very complicated problem which we need to create. We need to create an infrastructure. We need to improve the infrastructure. And we also, from consumer perspective, we need to create some reasons why people need to fly to regions, some interesting customer journey map, as I already said, to attract new passengers. How we can live with this crisis? Some options with complex trading scheme we can implement from Iran experience. Here you can see some ways how to live with the sanctions and text what options is available from Iran experience. We can get federal and regional support. As already said, we need to increase the number of the quality of aerodrome infrastructure, airport infrastructure, and create maybe a transit hub with friendly countries. Do not centralize our route network in the Moscow. That's create a decentralization route network in the regions. And one of the interesting way how to create, how to increase the passenger mobility, create regional clusters. It's to create a regional points of attractiveness. Here is some view of where we can create these points. It's also related, maybe you know this term, it's like a regional branding. We need to create a story for passenger. And I think this conclusion also can be important to you during your group work with Domna case. We need to use the regional branding. We need to create a regional story of why it's attractive. We need to create a story of how people not to arrive to Yekaterinburg and that's all. We need to create a story for him what Yekaterinburg is famous for, what is the specialization of this region, what is interesting in this region, what is interesting in a similar region, and incorporate our value proposition of airlines, value proposition of your company value proposition into regional branding. So the most important thing, this card is built with Rosturism, Федеральное агентство по туризму in Russian. We need to understand what this region is important, what we can create as a story for this region, and around this story attract new passengers, attract and create other services. So in your cases, maybe it's a good idea to relate your solution with something regional branding, something regional identity, which is important and which can attract different types of customers. And what is the effects of this measure? It's following the Russian air transport strategy until the 2030, where we can see that, of course, we can creating the regional hubs, creating the regional hubs for international flights. We can get more than 100 million passenger traffic in 2022. We can, in a medium-term perspective, by Russian manufacturers, Russian planes manufacturer, update our air fleet from foreign airlines to Russian airlines, MC-21, Sukhoi Superjets 2, and something else. And we can increase the transport mobility, as you can see, 4 flights per year, near the 5 flights per year, as in the European country with a similar climate, similar conditions, and something else. But it's a complex decision. In a short-term perspective, we need to create a new value proposition. I'm talking a lot about technical equipment, something else, but about the value proposition, we need to create it in regions. In a long-term perspective, the COVID-19 and the sanctions history showed us that it's a way for more stable situation with more uncertainty in case of external instability. So that's maybe all. I finished. I see that something, no question in the chat. Okay, guys, I finished. Maybe you have some questions.